Thank you, House Leader. Member of Parliament for Kingston East and Port Royal.
Madam Speaker, Jamaica stands at a defining crossroads. The decisions this Parliament makes on energy and telecommunications will determine whether our people pay less for electricity, whether our entrepreneurs can compete in a digital economy, and whether Jamaica leads or lags the region for the next generation. We on this side, the People's National Party, we come to this debate with a clear and unwavering conviction that the only sustainable path forward for this country is to build with purpose and to build with people. Every proposal I lay before this Parliament today is rooted in that conviction. That is what I have come to address today. I give thanks to the Almighty for the strength and the privilege to serve. Madam Speaker, I pay tribute to the people of the great constituency of East Kingston and Port Royal, who have once again elected me for the 7th straight term. And Madam Speaker, counting the number of years I spent in the other place, this year marks 31 years of service to this country. Every one of those years has been in service to the people of Jamaica, and in particular to my people in East Kingston and Port Royal, because they know when I win, they win. I extend special thanks to my councillors, and I have to pause to big up the newly elected Deputy Mayor of the KCC. I want to thank my task force. I want to thank my party leader for his continued faith in me as spokesperson on energy and telecommunications and as leader of opposition business. It's a responsibility I carry with the utmost seriousness. Madam Speaker, I did not come here today to reflect on the past. I came to speak about Jamaica's future. And in a moment, I will lay before this Parliament a set of specific and actionable proposals for energy and telecommunications that, if adopted, will lower costs for Jamaican households, accelerate our digital transformation, and position this nation as a competitive force in the Caribbean economy. I don't think I'll have the time today, so I'm inviting all the listeners and viewers to check my online presentation tomorrow at 5 p.m. Before I proceed, Madam Speaker, a brief word on my role as leader of opposition business. Much of the substantive work this year will center on the review of the standing orders, a process I welcome and to which the opposition is fully committed. We look forward to engaging with the comprehensive CPA document that you have provided, and we're grateful for that document. Our goal is a Parliament that is more dynamic, where minority voices carry real weight, and where democratic oversight is genuinely enshrined. And of course, we'll have enough time to address that in the Standing Orders Committee. But, Madam Speaker, there is one matter of parliamentary principle that I must place on the record because it speaks directly to the integrity of this institution and to the quality of our democracy. And I have shared this with you recently when you and I sat next to each other at a committee, and I thought to myself, my speaker should not be a member of this committee. My speaker should always be chairing a committee. But I don't like when the speaker has to get into some of the contentious issues. So the role of the speaker is by constitutional design and long-standing convention, one of strict impartiality. The chair exists above the partisan divide as a guardian of fair process for all members, government and opposition alike. It is therefore a matter of institutional concern, one that I raise out of respect, that we have recently witnessed the speaker's presence in contentious committee meetings in a manner that has been perceived as lending support to the government's policy. I don't think this is right, Madam Speaker. I think if we're serious about our standing orders reform, and if we're serious about strengthening Jamaican democracy, that we must also be serious about protecting you and the role of impartiality as Speaker. And so I say respectfully, Madam Speaker, you really ought to resist your party's inclination to demean the office, and I would advise in those matters where you're not chairing committees, you really ought not to remain on them. Madam Speaker, I am grateful to our party leader for returning the portfolio of telecommunications to my stewardship. I do not receive it as a ceremonial honor. I receive it as a mandate to complete work that remains unfinished. When I last held this portfolio, this Parliament oversaw one of the most consequential economic transformation in Jamaica's modern history, the full liberalization of telecommunications. That decision opened our airwaves to competition, drove down costs for Jamaican consumers, created thousands of jobs, and attracted foreign investment at a scale this sector had never seen. It was a model that every Caribbean nation subsequently followed, and one that international bodies have cited as a proven standard for developing economies. That legacy belongs not to a single individual, but to a vision of a political administration that was prepared to take bold decisions in the national interest. And I am very proud to be a part of that administration. And I say to this Parliament today, the boldness that built that foundation is precisely what this sector now requires again. Madam Speaker, we should pause to recognize two significant milestones that fall this year. Digicel, the only multinational company to have been founded in Jamaica and subsequently exported its reach and its character to markets across the world, celebrates its 25th anniversary, and we should salute them. We should salute them. We also have to recognize the Universal Service Fund, a cornerstone instrument for extending the connectivity to every corner of this island. Marks 21 years of distinguished operation, and we should salute them as well. These are not mere footnotes. They are proof that when Jamaica gets its telecoms policy right, the results are felt in communities, in businesses, and in the international reputation of this nation. Add to these the Spectrum Management Authority, the e-learning initiative, the e-government, which has now become information and communication, and the other institutions built during the period of reform, and the record speaks with clarity. This party built the architecture of Jamaica's digital infrastructure. We have every right to hold this government to account for what has or has not been done with it. And I did receive a message from the minister with responsibility, minister, the member from Western Portland, that he's unavoidably absent today. He had to do an emergency visit overseas. I was going to depute the leader of government business to take notes, but he's not here now. So I'm going to depute the member from West Kingston to do so.
I don't think note taking is important.
Madam Speaker, I say all of that not to dwell in the past, but to provide an honest baseline against which the present must be measured.
Yeah.
And when that measurement is made, the conclusion is uncomfortable. The telecom sector in Jamaica has, for the better part of the decade, been advancing at a pace that is simply not commensurate with the demands of the modern digital economy. Policy ambition in this sector has stalled. The last meaningful reform to be delivered was the implementation of number portability. That was in 2016. What was left on the table in 2016 remains on the table today. The issues identified then as urgent priorities have not been resolved. They have simply been deferred, whilst the world has moved on, and the gap between Jamaica's regulatory framework and the realities of a rapidly evolving global sector has continued to widen. Madam Speaker, allow me to place on the parliamentary record 5 areas of unfinished business that this shadow ministry intends to address fulsomely. Each of these is a commitment not to process, but to purpose and to people. First, the convergence of technology must be met with a convergence of regulation. The boundaries between telecommunications, broadcasting, and internet services have, in practical terms, ceased to exist. Secondly, Jamaica's transition from 4G LTE to 5G infrastructure cannot be allowed to proceed without a clear national strategy. Fifth generation connectivity is not simply faster internet. It is the foundational infrastructure upon which the Internet of Things, telemedicine, precision agriculture, smart cities, and the next generation of Jamaican industry will depend. Yes. We need a plan, and we need it now. Yes. Third, Madam Speaker, the co-location of telecoms infrastructure must be made a regulatory requirement. Competing providers constructing parallel and duplicated physical infrastructure is wasteful, visibly intrusive, and economically inefficient. Fourth, monopolistic control over access to submarine fiber cable capacity must be directly addressed. And fifth, meaningful competition, which we achieved some time ago, must be reintroduced again in those basic service segments where market concentration continues to work against the interests of ordinary Jamaica. So, Madam Speaker, the 5 structural issues I have just outlined are matters of regulatory policy. But I wish to speak to the lived experience of Jamaican consumers, because it is that lived experience which ultimately justifies the urgency of the reforms. The quality of our telecom services in Jamaica is by any objective measure below the standards that consumers are paying for and below the standard. Madam Speaker, I'm tired to be on my phone, losing the calls, seeing appearing on my screen, missed calls, and the phone didn't ring. Madam Speaker, I don't want to beat up too much on the providers, but the service is poor and we need an improvement in the service. And I have to call upon the Office of Utilities Regulation, because they have the obligation to enforce service quality standards with rigor and transparency. This Parliament has an obligation to hold it accountable for doing so. I intend to exercise that obligation fully. Madam Speaker, even as we press for a more resilient telecoms infrastructure, we must register our concern regarding a recent government initiative. On February 2nd, the government announced that it is engaging Trans-America's Fiber System Limited to design, build, and operate a subsea cable branching unit into Jamaica, together with an associated cable land station at a cost of $50 million. Let me remind this House that when we liberalized the telecoms industry in 2000, we achieved competition in relation to fiber access by awarding licenses to 2 companies, one of which, FiberLink, deployed service. At that time, Madam Speaker, I ensured that the government would have adequate access to fiber network by earmarking such provision within the license granted. That facility remains available to the government to this day. Unfortunately, the second company subsequently merged with Cable and Wireless, and we no longer have competition in that segment of the market. Prices are now very high, and we would welcome a return to a fully competitive environment. We would. We are, however, concerned about the role that the government intends to play going forward. Madam Speaker, we again call for full transparency. Nothing has been said publicly since the announcement in January, and this Parliament, I think, deserves an update. First, what is the total cost of the facility and how it will be financed? Second, has a written agreement been concluded with Trans-America's Fiber System Limited, and will it be shared with the Jamaican people? Third, on what basis and by what process will access to the facility be determined? Fourth, what is the defined and bounded role of the government in the operations and governance of this facility? Madam Speaker, we support the addition of greater bandwidth capacity for the country. However, we question the extent of government involvement, particularly given that, as I have noted already, we made adequate provision for the government with the award of the first license. So we await the answers from the government. I also want to say briefly, Madam Speaker, some 4 years ago, the minister had announced that there was another licensee granted license to get involved in cellular service. We haven't heard anything since that time. We want to see greater competition. We welcome competition. And we want to see that player on board. Madam Speaker, I want to speak briefly about the recent decommissioning of the 2G network. That has been completed, and the eventual decommissioning of the 3G network is a matter of when, not whether. I don't think sufficient plan, sufficient education had taken place as we removed that 2G network. Many of those persons with bangers were shocked that overnight they did not have service. So, and they still can't recover. So, Madam Speaker, a thorough assessment of the industries were affected, applications and public services that remain dependent upon 3G, as we move to 3G, abandonment. That is going to be urgently required so that the transition can be managed in an orderly, planned, and non-disruptive manner. As I proceed, Madam Speaker, because energy is the real high point, I believe, of the presentation, I just want to say one other word about telecoms. The Telecommunications Act. We passed modern legislation then in 2000. It's over 2 decades now. I think it is sufficient time for the government to revisit that law, to modernize the law, because the legislation is in urgent need of a comprehensive review. The nature of emerging technologies and the evolution in the way that established terminologies are applied means that the language of the Act requires updating to reflect current realities. And more fundamentally, the regulatory structure established by the Act must be modernized to take account of the convergence of technologies that I have already described. Madam Speaker, I want to turn to the Universal Service Fund. As I mentioned earlier, the fund celebrates 21 years of service, and I have acknowledged them, but I want to say a special word of thanks to the staff of the Universal Service Fund. And in particular, their deployment, their commitment to deploying the free Wi-Fi facilities across communities, often in challenging circumstances and certainly with evident enthusiasm. They represent the original mandate of this institution at its best. They have made a genuine and substantial contribution to enabling Jamaicans to access the internet. However, we have not yet achieved the goal of universal broadband connectivity across the island. The mission was to ensure that every single Jamaican in every community has ready access to high-speed broadband connectivity. That mission remains incomplete. And from as early as 2015, the Human Rights Council of the UN had declared that access to the internet is a basic human right. In today's society, the internet is a necessary component of the exercise of the right to freedom of expression, and its use promotes progress for society as a whole. My concern centers on the resources that were provided in this year's budget for the Universal Service Fund. I'm aware that they had asked for $1.4 billion to continue the work that they are doing to ensure that all communities in Jamaica had free Wi-Fi. They only received 400 million of the 1.4 billion asked. And I think that is wrong. And I want to commend to the Ministry of Finance that they look again at the allocation for the USF, because everybody inside here knows that those Wi-Fi facilities that have been established in communities, they cost a lot of money, but many of them don't work after a few weeks because there's no money to maintain them. There's no money to pay the bills. And it really is a shame, because you have these elaborate ceremonies where the communities celebrate the establishment of these free Wi-Fi, and after a short while, the system is down. We have to get the USF greater support, and this is their 21st year. Madam Speaker, again, I remind people, tomorrow you'll get a full presentation online. I wish JIS would cover it.
No holy breath.
The importance of energy to the growth of our economy is not a new argument. And I fully am aware that this House has heard it from me before. I make no apology for returning to it, because the problem has not been resolved, and the consequences for the Jamaican people grow more severe with each passing year. Right. The high cost of energy continues to impose a heavy burden upon our country. It bears down on every household struggling to make ends meet, on every commuter trying to get to work, and on every business fighting to remain viable. Until this issue is addressed with decisiveness and a genuine political will, sustainable economic growth will remain out of reach. On the matter of electricity pricing, the minister would have the country believe that the high price of electricity is attributable solely to the terms of the JPS license. It is necessary, Madam Speaker, to address that claim frontally today. The JPS license came into being in 2001. Over its life, it has been amended by the Jamaica Labour Party government, by the PNP government. Substantial amendments have occurred. Whenever it was necessary that changes were needed in the national interest. It is due to expire in July 2027. There is no legal impediment, Madam Speaker, that should prevent this government from initiating early negotiations and seeking a new license even before that expiry date. The truth, Madam Speaker, is that the failure to act has been a matter of political choice, not legal constraints. And it has sent the entire industry, JPS and all others, in a state of uncertainty that this country cannot afford. That's when I write it. Let me remind this House of the record. Madam Speaker, I remind the House, the price of electricity in 2016, under the very same license, was 26 US cents per kilowatt hour. Today, the price is in excess of 40 US cents per kilowatt hour. That increase has occurred under this government's watch.
Derelict.
Madam Speaker, I mentioned before that there were changes to the JPS license in 2016. The amendments of that license that took effect fundamentally restructured Jamaica's energy mix. So we did do fundamental change to the license in 2016. At that time, approximately 95% of electricity was being generated from heavy fuel oil and diesel, with only 5% due to renewables. As a direct result of the changes to that license, Jamaica's energy mix today stands at approximately 60% LNG, 25% heavy fuel oil, and 15% renewables. A complete revolution took place because we dared to change the license in 2016. That restructuring produced a significant reduction in electricity prices. It was deliberate policy, not accident. Let me remind this House, and it wasn't easy, you know, because when we first went to JPS to talk about bringing more renewables online, on the grid, they said if you put more than 5%, it's going to lead to instability. We're going to have shutdown and blackouts. And today we're at 15%. We need to get to 50%. Since that time, not a single new renewable source has been added. In 2013, we brought on 120 megawatts. Nothing has been added since that time. We also, in 2016, brought on net billing, where we allowed persons who were generating their own electricity through solar, doing more than they needed at home, to sell the excess to the grid. That was net billing. We gave 700 licenses during that period. What has happened since 2016? But, Madam Speaker, as I speak about the JPSK license, I think it is appropriate because in 2024, when we were hit by Hurricane Beryl, we did criticize the JPSK harshly for the slow response. I want to put on record our appreciation for the JPSK's response to Hurricane Melissa. And even though they are not 100% as yet, I think the effort has been valiant. We want the people, though, of Westmoreland to get electricity back as soon as possible. As soon as possible. And St. Elizabeth. But, Madam Speaker, let me go back to the license issue. Because today, I intend to show to this Parliament that the Minister need not start any negotiations for a new license. He need not import new advisors to advise him on the terms of a new license. From 2 years ago, we have been providing this Parliament the terms of that new license. Today, I'm going to give you the new license that the Minister should implement. So firstly, Madam Speaker, this is not new. We were able to do a new license for cable and wireless in 2001. All right. So what are the features? What are the features of this new license? One, the right of first refusal currently enjoyed by JPS for the replacement of its existing generation capacity must be removed. Any new generation license must be procured through the government-owned GPE entity by way of an internationally competitive tender, with awards based on least cost of available renewable technology, supported by the most efficient storage solution. You can't award licenses for renewables without thinking about storage. And the level of efficiency in storage has improved tremendously. I'm telling you what the new license must be. Two, Madam Speaker, secondly, wheeling must be implemented immediately under the new license. This is a facility that permits a large commercial.
You've been there for 10 years.
Yeah. You know, the license was written in 2016. These are provisions in that 2016 license. Only if we were there to implement them. Only if we were there to implement them. So wheeling is a facility that permits a large commercial or industrial enterprise to generate electricity at one location and to transport it across the national grid to its other locations, subject to a reasonable transmission fee. Time comes for that to be implemented. Madam Speaker, we have said so repeatedly that owners and tenants of special economic zone facilities must be permitted to generate their own electricity and to distribute it within the zone. This will reduce operational costs, improve competitiveness, and attract investment. The member from Western St. Andrew has been pleading that case. Both homeowners and businesses must be enabled to sell surplus electricity generated from rooftop solar installations to the national grid. The pricing structure for electricity sold through net metering licenses must be genuinely incentivized through an appropriate feed-in tariff mechanism. the distribution of electricity must be liberalized to accommodate microgrids. Microgrid licenses are to be awarded on a competitive basis with a specific mandate to provide service to unserved and underserved communities. Access.
Keep going. You have it. It's already approved. It's already approved.
Access. Every community must be served, even where a subsidy is required to make that provision economically viable. This is what it means to build with purpose and to build with people.
Yeah.
And very importantly, Madam Speaker, because this constitutes 20% of the cost of electricity that all of us pay, there must be a clear and enforceable mandate for the reduction and elimination of illegal connections substantially greater responsibility for before not being the case. Penalties for such occurrences in wealthy communities, because many people believe that theft only occurs in poor communities. I think we need to increase the penalties where people steal electricity in these wealthy communities and provide a mechanism for the poorer communities to get attached to the grid. Lawfully. The function of dispatch, which is that body that determines which generation you put on the grid, which is now done by the JPS, must be changed to a fully transparent system set up by the Office of Utilities Regulation. The separation of JPS accounts and operational functions, which again were mandated before, they must be implemented without further delay. Generation, transmission, and distribution must be clearly, and we have a whole raft of consumer protection standards, which must be comprehensively updated. Among them is the need to ensure that there are penalties that are associated for breaches of these standards. There are so many times when, because of fluctuation in voltages, your equipment at home, your appliances get damages. And when you turn to the JPS for compensation, they say, did you read the fine print of your contract? We have to change that to give consumer better protection. We have to also, Madam Speaker, move to the completion of the transition to LED street lighting. It must be mandated that the provision of the 2016 provisions must be enforced without further delay. We have quite a few recommendations for the new license. And you'll watch my thing tomorrow, very well. Because I have to say something about Petrojam, and finally, in the additional 10 minutes that I have, to say something about oil and gas exploration, because the minister has been talking of a storm about oil and gas exploration, not giving credit, and also not being forceful in trying to find oil and gas. So, Madam Speaker, Petrojam has been asked to carry water in a basket. In its current condition, the company will continue to record substantial losses year over year. This year, it was revealed in the Standing Finance Committee.
Paulwell, I note you only have 1 minute left. You know you are not the opener of the debate. So
He said both.
He said both. He said both.
no, he didn't.
Today he did.
And it is not both. The opener of the debate is the minister who opens the debate. Anyways, Ms. Brandon, could you please give him?
You did. You did say it. We all heard it, except the speaker.
Welcome back.
He's an honorable man.
No, so, but, Madam Speaker, I did in my reference would suggest that both persons who speak today would get the 10 minutes. But I do take your point that there is only one opener and closer of the debate. With that said, because we only, though we had started the discussion with the leader of opposition business, we only finalized after I spoke to you today. I would ask only on this occasion, in his position as just getting the time frame.
House Leader, the member spent time during his debate to argue about following the standing orders. And as the leader of opposition business, he is very clear that the opener and closer of the debate is the minister. From the government side who is assigned the duty of opening the debate. I am very clear as to who the opener of the debate is. And in respect of my request, and you may pull Hansard, I ask for time to be given to the opener and closer of the debate, separate and apart from 5 minutes being granted to the opposition spokesperson. I was very clear on what I asked for in the motion. Thank you very much, House Leader. The member has 1 minute to conclude.
Oh my God.
No. Madam Speaker, I rise to protest that ruling very strongly. This Parliament, though you are the chair, the arena is right here. And if the leader of government business and opposition business agree on a certain process, that is how it should go. You should not join the arena, Madam Speaker. I still am hoping that my colleague who and I entered into this agreement.
Don't give up. If I tap it in, it's no going further. We'll give you one.
Okay, but if you knew from the very beginning that you weren't going to get it, you would have done it differently. Yes, it's on the premise that you
He said, yes.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, in the spirit of the start of the debates and based on
And House Leader, I would also want you to incorporate, based on the discussion, or exactly what was agreed by the Speaker.
Yeah, so, Madam Speaker, as I indicated, when we had discussed the matter prior to which you rightfully indicated as according to Hansard, the discussion was in relation to the opener and closer of the debate. However, in my discussions with Member Paulwell, because we had not signed off on the time frame until we got to the House and seen that he would have prepared prior to, I thought it was only fitting to communicate that he would get some additional time. So I do understand the confusion. What I say is, in the circumstances, we allow the member an additional 5 minutes, along with the 5 minutes that he got to complete his presentation.
Ms. Brandon, please add 5 minutes to the time on the clock. Leader of Opposition Business, you have 6 minutes to complete.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and to colleagues. And I remind you to watch the live tomorrow and get the full chapter and verse. I was saying, Madam Speaker, that the government has given Petrojam basket to carry water. And I want to say to the minister, as he revealed recently that there is this price cap on the pricing mechanism at Petrojam, that we have to be very careful, because Petrojam has lost $4 million in the year 2020, $4 billion in the year ending 2025, another $4 billion in the year ending March 2026, and they're likely to lose a lot more. And rather than tampering with the pricing mechanism, I think you can provide consumers with some benefits, because the government is making a windfall in the taxes now being generated by fuels. So I want to say that, and I want to remind the government, there is something called a hedge tax, that was established to provide money to buy insurance and also to do the reforms that are necessary to transition from the heavy usage of heavy fuel oil and diesel. Nothing has happened since 2016. But, Madam Speaker, I'm going to go to the oil and gas section, because I think Jamaicans are very confused about the situation as it obtains to the search for oil. My conviction regarding the hydrocarbon potential of Jamaica's territorial waters was formed in a single defining meeting when I sat with the late Dr. Raymond Wright and spent several hours reviewing 3 decades of PCJ's data. I became firmly convinced that Jamaica sits atop a significant hydrocarbon system. It is true that wells had previously been drilled without yielding commercial quantities, but in 10 of those wells, we had oil shows. And what we mean by that is that we did find oil, but not in commercial quantities. So there's no question that the data points to oil being around in Jamaica, that there's evidence to suggest that there is oil. With the advances in deep sea exploration technology that have occurred in recent decades, I believe then and believe now that the search must continue. However, the government of Jamaica at the time could not fund the work that was necessary, especially because we were constrained by the IMF agreement. I therefore did at the time what was responsible. I took Jamaica's geological data, our technical case, and our ambition on a roadshow from Dallas to Dublin, seeking credible international partners. After all that effort, a single serious player emerged, Tullow Oil, which has since become United Oil and Gas. So that effort, you have heard about United Oil and Gas, that license was signed by me. My time. A 5-year agreement was signed in 2015. The commitment was explicit. The completion of 3D seismic data collection, followed by drilling no later than 2020. That's in the agreement that they were supposed to have drilled for oil by 2020. And even as we signed the agreement, then we were busy negotiating with another significant player, Repsol. All of that fell through after 2016. So I'm very disappointed, Madam Speaker. In place of results, this country has been so and tantalizing revelations by press releases and